Thank you so much, Pooja. And I'm really excited to be doing this session with two stalwarts of the IT industry. Thank you so much, Rekha and Krishnan, for being a part of this session. So the theme of the conference is Reimagine Business. And we're going to talk about reimagining business in this session as well. But we'll also focus on some of the sub-themes around reimagining talent and reimagining growth and reimagining go-to-market. And we'd love to hear from your vantage point, what you're seeing. So some of those lessons and learnings can be used by our SME members to focus on and to look at in future for the growth. To set context for this session, though, what would be great, both you, Rekha and Krishnan, is if we could talk about the changes that you've been seeing in the past couple of years. You know, on one hand, we've had this war on talent, and on the other hand, the IT services, the demand for the IT services has been exceptionally strong. So how have you been navigating these challenges and opportunities, both in your organizations? Maybe Rekha, if you could go first, and Krishnan to follow.
All right. Thank you, Samir. I'm very glad to be here. So you're right. I mean, the last few years have been absolutely unprecedented, with massive changes sweeping the entire industry. Whether it's the businesses which have had to reinvent themselves and create new business models, whether because there were new consumption patterns, new consumer behaviors, the pandemic came in. So there's been a steep learning curve. And then the other focus, which is on people, because we had to navigate collectively the BCP crisis on the first wave, both to keep our businesses going, but look after our people, and then learning to lead our people with empathy in a remote environment. And now what we are seeing is massive compressed transformation, which is underway for our clients. And therefore the need for being very agile and for scaling very quickly, even as we battle the acute talent shortage that you mentioned, right? Coming to how we have managed from Accenture, just very shortly, one, we've had two focus areas: people, clients. Two things. One, people, health and well-being, their aspirations, their future, that's been our North Star. And, how do you keep them safe and healthy? How do you help them embrace the new future of work? How do we stay committed to their future? Keeping them on the path to growth, whether it's raises or new policies to respond to the changing environment, or training and development, and continue the focus on that. So that's one element, is the people. Second is client, which is really, in addition to looking at what we were doing for our clients and keeping them going, the other was anticipating the emerging needs and drive the next wave of growth for all of us. So we broadened our existing capabilities: security, cloud, applied intelligence. We actually introduced new offerings during this period, Interactive, Industry X.0, sustainability, and then augmented all the digital capabilities that we had. And we also went on an acquisition spree, especially for deep tech companies, whether it was Umlaut or Imagia or Bridge Eye2Eye. So that's just quick summary of what we've been doing and how we've been responding.
Thank you, Rekha.
So, Samir, let me also add my thanks. It's a real pleasure and privilege to be here along with you, Rekha, and addressing this audience. So I'm looking forward to this session today. Very quickly, coming to your question, and I completely agree with everything that Rekha said. In particular, the focus on the employees and the clients, right, as the two pillars. I couldn't agree more with that. Just without repeating the things that Rekha said, the only addition that I would make is perhaps in terms of dealing with the attrition, which must be a significant issue for this audience as well. Right? So obviously, we need to do everything we need to do from a tactical point of view, which is to make sure that your best performers, your people who are key to your clients and your products or services, you need to do what you need to do to be able to retain them. Right? But on a larger note, a more strategic note, the most important thing is to keep deepening the funnel, right? Because as much as it is a pain to deal with, attrition is also indicative of an underlying good thing, which is very, very strong, exceptionally strong demand that we have not seen in a very long time, right? So that's the core thing that we need to focus on, the fact that the demand is very strong and looks set to continue that way for the foreseeable future, which means today, tomorrow, for the next couple of quarters, we may really be in trouble. But I think it's important for us to look beyond the next couple of quarters and see how can we expand the funnel of talent to make sure that at least 2-3 quarters down the line, we are in a reasonably comfortable position to be able to capture the opportunities and grow from there on.
Thanks. So we'll talk both about talent and clients in a little bit more detail, but let's double click on talent first. Krishnan, to you, do you think our employees are ever going to come back to office? That's the first question. And the second question is that the TCS has this, the 25-25 model that we heard about, where by 2025, 25% of our employees will be in office for 25% of the time. So do you see that as something that TCS needs, or do you think as a rule or as a whole, the entire industry is going to adopt something similar to that?
Sure. So I'll come to the TCS specific things later, Samir. But very quickly, I'll start by saying something very provocative, right? And probably not fashionable too. If we just step back from the current mania about working from office or people ever going to come back and so on, my wager is that 5 years from now, we'd all gone back to what was about 90% of what was normal pre-pandemic. Okay. At a given time, given where we are, it looks like that's the biggest problem. Things are never going to go back. But we can go back in history to many other things that we thought were going to change mankind completely. But it rarely, very few are those that permanently change the way people behave. Already, if you see, myself included, a lot of us are actually sick and tired of working 100% from home, right? We actually thirst to be getting together. The NASCOM group would be another one as well, right? We just can't wait for the offsite. We're all keenly looking forward to the offsite next week or week after next to get together so we can all actually see each other, shake hands, and truly be a team. So it's very clear that people really want to be in contact with other people, work in person. And I see that in many of the TCS colleagues' attitudes and approaches as well. Right? So the pendulum was one way, 100% in the office to 100% at home. Now it's swinging in between, trying to decide where to settle down. So my wager is that it will settle down somewhere 90% of where it was pre-pandemic. Right? With that said, one important and probably permanent change that the pandemic imposed work from home culture over the last 2 years that will leave in its trail is the fact that working from home as a part of the package, the flexibility of being able to work from home as it suits the circumstances of the company, the client, the individual concerned, that will be a non-issue going forward, because we have practiced and we have now proven that we can all work from home 100% without impacting any of the important priorities, either for the customer or for our own internal reasons, security, or whatever you name it. Right? So that having been established, now it's a question of making sure that the individual preferences and needs for being able to work remotely, that will have to be addressed, and that will be addressed. And TCS's 25/25 is a good model, and I think various companies have their own versions of the same. But we do think that's a very good thing to happen, and that will bring many, many benefits. But it's also important, while we talk about the benefits of remote working from the point of view of bringing more women into the workforce, avoiding the stress of commute and so on, there are also two important disadvantages of losing this working from the office thing. Right? The first and the most important thing from a company's point of view is the sense of identity, sense of belonging, being in a team, culture. Every company has a culture and identity, right? And that is sadly pretty close to getting lost. And that is very close to losing a company's soul. So that's a very important disadvantage that we should not lose sight of. And the other, probably not very much talked about, although in NASCOM, we take that as a big priority, is that if the 100% are pretty close to 100% working from home, while it may be great from many angles, it will be a disaster for many of the ancillary small scale industries that are around the IT industries, right? Our many of the buses that ferry our people to canteen services and so on and so forth. It's a big disaster for them. We cannot lose sight of that as well. So I hope for all our sakes that my wager is right, and we will go back to about 90% of what was normal pre-pandemic. Sorry, it was a bit long-winded. Rekha, please.
No, so
That's
I
my-
have another question for Rekha. You know, so we'll talk about you know, so I don't know if this is that controversial to SMEs because they are really struggling, and what they're struggling with is not just the hiring but also the engagement. I think you talked about the culture and how to build that digital culture, but the lack of engagement is also causing a lot of attrition. And for customers as well, the lack of engagement translates into lack of collaboration between colleagues, so, and that's showing as well. So Rekha, maybe you could talk about that and how what you're seeing and how you're solving that at Accenture.
Okay. So yeah, I agree with Krishna. It's been hard, with 100% remote. While it gave us lots of flexibility, it allowed us to hire into different talent pools. And none of us have dropped our business goals at all. In fact, we've all grown. But it has been hard because culture, and many new joiners have not met their teams or managers or peers, right? And so therefore, I would say that an extra investment is needed to find very innovative ways to keep people engaged and motivated. And the old models no longer work, obviously. And therefore, I would say that technology can come in here very effectively to connect with people and empower them. And we've been using it very effectively, whether it's our new joiner orientation, which now includes being in the metaverse, making very sure it's an immersive experience. There's virtual interaction with leaders, making sure that they are digitally enabled check-ins and there's collaboration opportunities. Supervisors have to work a little harder to make the connect one-on-one, which you could do around a coffee earlier. Also, we've had to change our policies to support this new way of working, right? Because the old models don't work. So you've had to look at what's needed in this environment. So for example, we've stressed on mental health. We've created new caregiver leave, etc. Just two examples, because times have changed and we need to keep them engaged. We've also done a lot of feedback sessions to see what is it that people want. And a lot of people told us, look, at the end of a whole day on Zoom or Teams, I don't want one more, hey, let's chug a beer across and say hello to each other. I want to go get out, right? So we said, okay, we listen to you on that one, right? Just as an example. So again, it's because it's such a big issue, we have to stay very, very sharp on how are we going to engage the people? How are we going to collaborate? And digital is one way to do it, right? And, the leadership skills have also had to change. There's far more emphasis on understanding people's context at home, and therefore far more empathetic and compassionate leadership that's needed. And therefore getting, training our leaders, expecting different from them is the other thing to look at. And then, of course, using data to drive decisions, figuring out what's going on, getting feedback all the time, and then using that to drive how do we engage our people more. Some of the examples.
Okay, from people to customers, we talked about why customers and how customers are also a big focus areas. Krishnan, how have the customer expectations changed due to the pandemic? And maybe specifically, while you talk about other things, you could also focus on the fact that some of our SME members are complaining or at least struggling with the fact that they're no longer meeting their customers. And so that engagement has gone. So how do you fix that? And then the other thing about building offices and getting closer to customers, and for larger companies, it was more about being near shore. So is that still being looked at, or is completely offshore fine? So maybe you could just talk about those two.
So as always, it's the answer is somewhere in the middle. It's never one end or the other, Samir. So firstly, going back to your question on what has really changed by way of customer expectations, right? At a fundamental level, not much has changed, because at the end of the day, what most customers expect is continue to serve me, make sure that there are if there are any advances, that's great, but make sure that there are no retrograde steps because of the issue is one. When you look at it that way, the most important change that I would say that has come into the customer's attitude and approach is just in case as opposed to just in time, right? So whether it is in terms of carrying inventories or supply chains, what have you, the approach is clearly shifting from just in time to just in case. So just in case X happens, how will we deal with it? Just in case Y happens, how will you deal with it? And that in turn is driving a lot of their approaches and strategies, right? Be it in terms of a resilient supply chain, better cybersecurity preparedness, flexible capacity on the compute infrastructure, and so on and so forth, right? That we have seen all of those. That has also been a very big part of why the demand is exploding across multiple dimensions. Right? To your question on how will we address the issue of lack of contact, unfortunately, there are no easy answers to that, because at the end of the day, as human beings, for thousands, if not millions of years, we have all been wired to be social animals, to survive and thrive based on physical contact and collaboration with each other, quite in person. And for a couple of years of pandemic-induced forced remote working, to be able to address the most fundamental needs of us as a species is going to be well nigh very difficult, if not impossible. I would leave it at that. So, which is one of the reasons why I said what I said in answer to your previous question, that we will go back to 90% of where we were pre-pandemic, because I do believe that it's a very, very fundamental need for human beings to be in contact with each other and work in person. So hopefully that gives you some perspectives.
I mean, can I add to that?
Absolutely.
So I would actually say that I see this as an opportunity for SMEs, because customers have also adapted, and virtual models have worked. The proof point is the industry growth. And while earlier the large organizations are the ones who had access to the customers, had developed those relationships, had offices, had reach. Now, because of the virtual model, SMEs can have similar access as a large player, right? The key is to really develop sales capability, is to develop credibility, is to develop trust. And if you can do that, you are in through the door as much as the large players are. Customers are not saying, I will only talk to the large players, right? It's just that till now, the large players had the advantage. This has leveled the playing field to quite a degree, is the way I see it.
Absolutely. I remember when we spoke in Delhi, you mentioned this exact thing about, how the same opportunities are also available to the smaller companies. And I did want to ask you that question. So a good segue. What are some of those opportunities that you think are available to SMEs, with some of your mid-size and larger customers? And maybe another area around this question is, should they stay vertical focused? Should they niche down into one area, or should they be more broad-based? So how can they be future ready? Because I feel that that's a lot of SMEs tend to be everything to everyone. And yet what we hear is, productize your services or just focus on retail because, that's where you get depth. So want to hear your perspective about this.
Okay, let me start by answering the second question first, because I remember it, that's all. One, it's a hard question to answer, saying which exact area should we focus on, because there's huge opportunities, right? But I would say identify one or two niche areas where they can stand out from their competition. But that's just a business truism, right? How do you enhance your differentiation? How do you enhance your competitiveness in the market? It also helps if you're focusing on niche areas to have the talent build out, to attract the right kind of talent, which was an issue we talked about earlier. But there's a danger of focusing specifically. For example, if somebody had focused on the hospitality industry in the pandemic, guess what would have happened? Business would have shut, right? Or a particular geography. Again, given the current conflict, it would have been hard, right? So I would say rather focus on, in terms of either a technology focus or a sub-industry focus, but within the industry, hedge your bets, right? And now micro verticals are available, right? So when you say I'm financial services guru, what do you mean by financial services guru? There are lots of options available, right? So within that, pick your areas. Also, what's happening is the big players, because they're growing so fast, don't have all the capabilities anymore and are looking to build partnerships. And that's where SMEs can very, very easily come in, right? Whether it is in the traditional IT services domain, right? Whether it's infra management services or SI because of the cloud, transition to cloud, or new tech adoption, AI, ML, NLP, business analytics, blockchain, intelligent automation. These will continue to grow very rapidly in the next few years. So which one are you playing in is what you have to decide. Are you in, SaaS, another huge area of growth, right? Engineering and R&D solutions, another big area of growth. So I could list out long opportunity areas where you could play in, or segments. Is it healthcare? Is it telecom? Is it automotive? And which one is the SME going to play in? So, and then there are completely new emerging opportunities, which are just at the cusp, whether it's sustainability, for example, right? And so therefore, SMEs have the ability to actually leapfrog. I'm very optimistic because I do believe they have, given the opportunity, given the larger customer base, it's no longer enterprise that's buying, right? Every small kirana store has to go digital. Every hospital has to go digital, etc. So the landscape has expanded, I would say. The pie has expanded, and they can really leapfrog, and they can stay agile as long as they invest in both technology but also in people. So if they focus on being specialized and bringing very key skills, either working with larger enterprise as they collaborate with them, or actually going after newer segments and customers, which are now available.
So I'd like to pick up
both your questions. I don't know.
No, it does. It does. No, absolutely. And Krishnan, would you want to add to that? And I'd also like to talk about that skilling question that you raised, Rekha. But Krishnan, do you want to add to the opportunities for SMEs?
No, I would agree broadly with many of the things that Rekha said, Samir. And being focused or broad-based is actually a contradiction in terms from a strategy point of view, because as a business, you don't have the option of not being focused on. What I would broadly say is that as a SME, clearly these are challenging times, both good and bad. So once you are clear on your value proposition, your approach and strategy, what is it that you represent by way of a value proposition to the customer, have the conviction to stick to it. That's probably the only thing that I would add to what Rekha said.
Okay, Krishnan, so let me take up this question about training the workforce, the existing workforce as well. Because some of our SMEs are talking about, let's say, larger BPO companies and have been skilled in a particular area, and now suddenly there's a talk about RPA or some of the newer technologies or expectations that customers have. So how are you skilling your employees or upskilling your employees, or the obviously you have that the perfect way to train new hires or fresh hires, but what about the existing workforce? How do you train them?
Absolutely, Smir. So it is all well and good for TCS to talk about skilling internal forces, electronic learning platforms, and so on, when we are a 500,000 plus people company with $25 billion in revenue. But in answering this question and make it contextual to the audience, right? I would go back to when TCS was barely a little more than an SME, right? When I joined TCS, for example, there were less than 2,000 people in the company. Even back then, one of the things that I would say made TCS reach the heights that it has reached today, the most important ingredient is the ability to infuse constant, we didn't call it lifelong learning then, but constant learning as a key proposition. Whether starting from Mr. Kohli, who is our founder and the father of the industry, to Mr. Ramdarai, to Chandra, to now Rajesh, that is one key theme that all of our 4 CEOs and all of us down the chain have been constantly pushing. Technologies come and go, but people have to have this ability to constantly learn and make themselves relevant for the future. Right? So that is one very strong advice that I would give. And it is possible, even when you're a small and medium industry, to a very large company. So inculcating that sense and the culture within your company is a very important thing. Make sure that in addition to your people's performance in front of the customer, their own learning performance, their own ability to equip themselves and make themselves relevant for the future, meaning learning outcomes, make that a key part of their core objectives and scorecards, and measure them on that. People who do well on that front, reward them well, preserve them well, and make sure that the culture is spread, would be my response to that.
Rekha, would you like to add?
I'll make a plug here for NASSCOM's future skills, because as SMEs, it's hard to build your own training modules. So NASSCOM has future skills and future skills prime, and all NASSCOM members have access to it. And it is very much what Krishnan was talking about. You can do learning lifelong on that, different modules, old technology, new technology, soft skills. So use that. There are MOOCs available. So use that. But I agree with him that learning has to be part of the DNA.
And just we're winding down to the last couple of questions, or we'll see how this goes. But as chair and vice chair of NASSCOM, could you both offer any tips for entrepreneurs, for SME entrepreneurs, in terms of how they should navigate the next few months and how they should go about building their organizations? So whoever wants to go first.
Okay. I will just actually summarize what Krishnan and I have been speaking about actually. So one, what are you known for? What's your USP? What problem are you solving? What space are you occupying? Be very clear on that, and then build on it. One. Two, and again, when you say space, it can be a micro vertical. It doesn't have to be a large vertical. Second, as you defend your core, simultaneously invest in the new. Because if you don't innovate and if you don't invest in growth, you're dead in the long run. So therefore, that also means very careful cost management, very careful building efficiencies into the organization, etc. But you have to keep investing in the new. Third, people. We've talked about nothing but people, but it is people. Build the right teams, invest in them, grow them, skill them. And fourth, I would say, develop ecosystem partnerships. Collaborate both within and outside the ecosystem in order to add speed, add agility, add growth. That's what I would say.
My 2 cents, again, completely agreeing with everything Rekha said and building on that. Firstly, once you know what your core is, stick to it, as Rekha said. Please focus on the purpose. When I say purpose, it's not about from a corporate social responsibility point of view, but what is the purpose for which your customer employs your product or service? What is the end purpose, right? And constantly focus on how can I be more relevant to that broader purpose, even beyond what my products and services represent today, right? That will give you a clear focus on the future and how can you be more relevant to your customers, and you cannot go wrong with that. That would be one thing that I would say. Secondly, and perhaps I would say tactically, but it's a little more than being tactical. Technology. Please adopt technology in every little sliver that you can. That will serve you very well in the long run. And thirdly, probably on a philosophical note, tough times bring out who your true friends are, right? Just as these days of great resignation are a great time to be an employee and keep getting 20, 30, 40, 50% higher pay packages, this is a very difficult time to be a company in general and an SME in particular, right? Don't lose sight of the people who have the conviction to stick with your core purpose and stick with you during these difficult times and not be lured by those higher pay packages and so on. Those are the ones you want to keep for the long term. The people who stand by you in times of difficulty, never lose sight of them. Sure as day follows night, the opposite will also happen. During those times, you make sure that you take care of them who stood by you during these times of difficulties. Those would be the 3 things that I would add.
Thank you so much, both of you. I think we've run out of time, Rekha and Krishnan. I think that those were amazing insights, and some of them being reinforced in terms of focus on people, whether they're employees or your customers. about agility in this massively compressed transformation that we talk about, and how to focus on constant learning and be there just in time, or focus on just in time opportunities, or how do you prepare for that. So a lot of insights there. Thank you so much. I'm very sure the SME members who are listening and would find it very, very useful as they go about planning the future and navigate some of the challenges that come their way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you, Rekha. It was a pleasure.